I was sitting at the edge of my bed, wrapped in a shawl that smelled of lavender and tears. The room was cold, not because the heater was broken, but because the silence from my children had become louder than any storm. It had been 2 years since any of them called. 2 years since Lucia, my eldest daughter, told me, "Mama, we're busy with our lives. You wouldn't understand." 2 years since my grandson called me La Vieja Loca to my face at Christmas dinner. And 1 week ago, I received a letter. Not a phone call. Not a visit. Just a printed letter that said, "Dear Senora Belver, as discussed, you will be removed from the family property in Alicante by the end of the month." I stared at that paper, my hands trembling, not from old age, but from betrayal. That property, that home, I bought it, with my own money, with my own sacrifices, with my own bones breaking and healing in hospital hallways while I worked overtime as a nurse during Franco's Spain. I built that house while raising 3 children alone after my husband died. And now, they had signed it away, behind my back, like I was nothing. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what Lucia wrote at the bottom of the letter, in blue ink, as if it were a casual afterthought. "You should have taken better care of your life, Mama. You gave too much. That was your choice." I dropped the letter, and my knees buckled beneath me. I crawled to the dresser, not to find help, but to find proof that I wasn't crazy. That I once meant something. I opened the drawer and pulled out the photo. It was faded, torn in the corner, but it showed me in my 20s, holding all 3 of my babies. I was smiling, even though my blouse had a tear and the food was barely enough for all of us. "I did this for you," I whispered. "I gave everything for you." And now, I had nothing but this photo and a notice of eviction. But what my children didn't know, what Lucia, Javier, and Mateo were too blind to remember, was that I still had something left. Something they could never take. And I was going to use it. My name is Soledad Belver. I am 85 years old, born in the hills of Zaragoza, Spain. I was the second of 4 daughters. My father always wanted a son, and I think I spent my whole life trying to fill that role. When he died, I became the breadwinner at 14. By 19, I was a nurse. By 23, I was a mother. I married Rafael, a bricklayer who was strong in the hands but soft in the soul. He died when I was 35, heart attack. Left me with 3 children and a mortgage on a half-built house in Alicante. I didn't cry. I didn't have time. I worked double shifts at Fundacio Hospital in Valencia, cleaned floors at night, sold scarves at the Sunday market. I remember those years as a blur of bruised feet and burnt fingers from ironing school uniforms. But my children, they had shoes. They had books. They went to good schools, because I made sure of it. Lucia became a corporate lawyer in Barcelona. Javier opened a chain of car dealerships. Mateo? He was a dreamer. A musician who ended up running sound for famous flamenco artists. They all left home, got married, built lives. And for a while I was proud. Until they stopped calling. Until the only time they came was when their kids needed birthday money. Or when someone needed me to babysit, without pay. Or when Lucia's in-laws came over and they didn't want La Abuela in the background. I still remember the day I overheard her say to her husband, "She's too old to matter. Let's just send her to Malaga. It's sunny there. She won't know the difference." I didn't cry. Again. I had no more tears left in me. But I made a plan. I took my pension quietly. Sold the jewelry Rafael gave me, pieces I had never worn. I even sold the antique sewing machine my grandmother left me. And I did something no one expected. I bought land. A small piece of coastal farmland near Murcia, with olive trees and an old ruin of a cottage. Everyone thought I was crazy. At your age, they asked. But I was done being the useless old woman. I planted roots again. Literally. I dug the soil with my bare hands, planted tomatoes, cucumbers, and lavender. I built a life where I didn't have to be the grandmother who waits by the phone. I became the woman who walks barefoot at dawn and eats from her own garden. But I didn't tell my children. Not a word. They thought I was still sitting in a rented room in Valencia, though I was begging them for scraps. They sent pity gifts, old sweaters, expired food, check-in texts every 2 months. And then they made a mistake. Lucia discovered my land when she hired a private investigator. She thought I had hidden wealth. She thought I had lied. So she forged my signature, transferred the Alicante home into her name. Send that letter. Smiling, thinking she'd finally taught me a lesson. But she had no idea. The land I bought. I never registered it under my name. I registered it under the name of an old trust. One she couldn't access. One I controlled. And that trust had grown. I leased part of it to a solar panel company. I built 2 Airbnb cottages that foreigners love. I have money now. Quiet money. But more than that, I have power. And now that they've pushed me out of the house I built, they have no idea what's coming. Tomorrow is Lucia's birthday party. A grand gathering at the Alicante villa, my former home. She invited politicians, lawyers, and the local press. She doesn't know I'm coming. And she certainly doesn't know. I bought the house next door. I stood behind the tall olive tree at the edge of the property, watching the laughter float across the garden I once pruned with my own hands. Lucia had turned my home into a venue, a modern cold thing with polished white furniture and champagne flutes balanced on trays carried by waiters. There was music, laughter, and people clinking glasses, none of whom remembered how this house came to be. But I remembered. I remembered when the only sound was the crackling fire and the sound of my knees bending on the stone floor as I prayed for enough money to feed my children. I remembered hanging old curtains to divide rooms, hiding the rot with wallpaper I applied myself. Now they served truffle canapés in the kitchen where I used to peel potatoes with bloody fingertips. I clutched my shawl tighter around my shoulders and took a deep breath. The party had already begun, and they had no idea I was just steps away. Watching. The neighbors, my new neighbors, were kind enough to let me stay in their back guest house. What they didn't know was that I owned the deed of their house, too. Through the same trust Lucia couldn't trace. I had quietly bought out several properties in the area over the past year. Every time my children turned away, I turned their rejection into action. And now, I was close enough to hear my own name on their lips. She won't come, Lucia said, swirling her drink. I made it clear in the letter. That place was never hers. She gave it to me in her own way. It's for the best. I gave it to her. My fingers clenched. My own daughter was rewriting history to make herself feel better, telling people I had somehow offered up my life's work as a gift, that I had bowed out gracefully, like a tired queen laying down her crown. I almost turned away. Almost. But then I saw him, Mateo. My youngest. The one with the softest heart. He was in the corner, holding his guitar like he always did, as if it anchored him to earth. But his face was different now. Worn. Anxious. And when someone asked him, "Will your mama be here today?" he didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the back gate. The very one that separated this house from the one I now owned. And as if by fate, he turned and saw me. He froze. I froze. "Mama," he whispered. The air between us hung heavy. He hadn't seen me in over a year. Not since I told him I was moving out of the city. I didn't tell him where I went. I didn't want pity. I didn't want empty words. I just wanted peace. "Yes, Mateo," I said softly,
stepping out of the shadows. "It's me."
He rushed toward me, tears already in his eyes. "Where have you been?"
"We thought," Lucia said, "you didn't want to see us anymore."
I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't the carefree boy I raised. There were dark circles under his eyes, a sadness in his voice.
"Did you believe her?"
I asked. He didn't answer. I smiled sadly. That's what hurts the most. He hugged me, tightly, like he used to when he was 10 and afraid of thunder. And then the music stopped. Lucia stood on the porch, holding a glass of champagne mid-air, frozen in disbelief. Her voice cut through the silence. "Mama, what are you doing here?" I stepped forward, letting my footsteps echo over the stone tiles she thought she owned. "I came to wish you a happy birthday, Lucia," I said, voice calm. "And to deliver a gift." There were gasps as I pulled out the envelope from my shawl. Not a card. Not flowers. A formal notice. Lucia's eyes narrowed.
"What is that?"
"An offer. For the land next door. The buyer wants to convert it into a cultural retreat. Music, art, community meals. A place that honors real family." She looked confused, then annoyed.
"So, I'm the seller," I said, locking eyes with her. "Because I own that house."
There were murmurs. One of the journalists nearby leaned closer. "Wait, you own that property?" I smiled. "Yes, and a few others in this neighborhood, too. I've been busy." Lucia's face paled. "You were supposed to be in a care home," she hissed. "You were supposed to be tired." I leaned in closer. "I was. But every time you turned away from me, you gave me something. Time. Time to think. Time to act.
Time to become more than the mother you tried to erase."
Mateo looked stunned. Even Javier, who'd barely acknowledged me, stepped forward, looking between me and Lucia like he was seeing us both for the first time. And then I dropped the final piece. "Oh, and one more thing." Lucia turned slowly. "I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to invite you," I said. "To what?" she asked coldly. I handed her a second envelope. "To the ribbon cutting. For the Belver Foundation. A non-profit for abandoned elderly women. The first shelter opens in Murcia next month. Fully funded. Fully legal. Fully in your name." "My name?" she asked, stunned. "Oh yes. I named it after you," I said with a sweet smile. A reminder of who inspired it. But Lucia didn't take the envelope.
Instead, she turned, threw her glass on the floor, and stormed into the house.
And as I stood there in the middle of the party, guests staring, my son trembling, and cameras still rolling, Lucia shouted from inside, "Check the trust fund again, Mama. You're not the only one with secrets." My heart stopped. What had she done? I stared at the words glowing on my laptop screen. "You shouldn't have done that." For a moment, I thought it was a joke. Some viruses. Maybe a glitch. But as the screen faded to black again, and I heard the soft mechanical whir of the hard drive spinning down, my chest tightened. This wasn't just about family betrayal anymore. This was war.
"Mateo," I called, my voice trembling.
"Come here." He was in the kitchen preparing coffee. Bless him, he was still trying to act normal, trying to fix things with warm milk and toast like we were still a family. But when he saw the look on my face, he didn't even ask. He walked straight over. I pointed to the screen. "It just happened.
Right after I emailed the lawyer."
He tried to restart the computer. Nothing. Completely dead. "You're sure it wasn't just a power failure?" he asked.
"I know what I saw."
He sat down next to me, silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You think Lucia's been watching you?"
I looked him in the eye.
I think she has help. This isn't something she could do on her own. And now I know who Emilio Cortez is. He blinked. You do? I nodded slowly. He was Rafael's cousin. I used to run with some shady people in Barcelona. Got into crypto fraud, real estate scams, even rumors of laundering. Rafael cut him off years ago. But Lucia? She always admired the way he worked. Said he was efficient. Efficient, Mateo echoed, bitterly.
She would say that.
I pulled open the bottom drawer of my cabinet and grabbed the old burner phone I had hidden there, one I used years ago when dealing with sensitive transactions. I had kept it for emergencies. I guess this qualifies. I called Carmen. Not Carmen, my neighbor. Not Carmen, the church friend. Carmen Alvarez, the investigative journalist I met 5 years ago when she was reporting on elder abuse in Madrid. We'd bonded over coffee and grief. She had lost her grandmother to a care home scandal. She picked up on the second ring. Soledad, she said, surprised.
It's been years.
I need you, I said. I have something explosive. But someone just shut me down.
Literally. There was a pause, then. Where are you?
I'm coming to you. Now. While we waited, Mateo went pale with guilt. I feel like this is all my fault, he whispered. I touched his hand.
Don't say that.
But I didn't protect you, Mama. I didn't check on you. I didn't ask questions. I let Lucia run the family like a company.
She told me you wanted distance, and I believed her.
I gave him a sad smile. We all believe what we want when it's easier than confronting the truth. Can you forgive me? I took a deep breath. You came back.
That's more than the others did.
Just then, the doorbell rang. I opened it, and there stood Carmen in a black coat, her eyes scanning the street behind her like she expected to be followed.
You weren't kidding, she said.
I picked up something strange on your email. Someone rerouted your message after it left your server. My heart skipped. So my lawyer didn't get it?
No. It was intercepted.
Mateo muttered a curse under his breath. I brought a clean laptop, Carmen said, stepping inside, and a portable VPN server. Whatever you've got, show me. I plugged in the USB. We watched together in silence. The audio files, the forged documents, the threatening screen. She nodded slowly. You were right. This is a coordinated operation. And if I'm not mistaken, someone hired a digital fixer, someone with deep access to public records, banking systems, even legal filings. And you think it's Emilio? I asked. I think Emilio is just the face. There's someone else. A partner. Possibly. Someone from inside your old law firm. That hit hard. Lucia's husband, Alberto, had once been a legal aid. Quiet. Bland. Loyal to Lucia like a dog to a master. But he had access to every document I ever signed. He knew where to dig. Carmen stood. You need to get ahead of this. I'll publish what I can, but if they come after your assets legally, we need a witness.
Someone else who knew what was happening.
I turned to Mateo. He swallowed hard. I'll testify. I'll say what I saw. What I overheard.
Anything you need.
My heart swelled and cracked at the same time. He was the only one who still saw me. The only one brave enough to stand beside me. Carmen reached into her coat. Also, you need protection. She handed me a small GPS tracker and a number. If anything happens, press this. It pings me and a private security contact.
Do not go anywhere alone.
I nodded slowly, fear beginning to mix with adrenaline. They wanted to erase me. But now they'd lit a fire. and I had one last card to play. Later that night, I sat on the porch while Matteo slept. The stars above Murcia felt cold, distant. I thought about the years I scrubbed floors until my fingers bled, the nights I went without food so the children could eat, the Christmas I sold my wedding ring to buy a second-hand violin for Matteo. All of it, done in love. And now, the very people I'd built my life around had tried to erase it. But I was still here. And I wasn't done. The next morning, Carmen called in a panic. "Don't leave your house," she said. "Something happened overnight. All your land deeds, every single one, has been transferred." I froze. Transferred to who? She paused. To a new shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, under Lucia's name. I dropped the phone. It didn't fall far, just to the soft rug by my chair, but the sound it made felt like an earthquake. A cold quake that rattled every bone in my body. Everything I had worked for, every olive tree, every flower bed, every stone wall I rebuilt with my bare hands, was now in the hands of my own daughter. Legally. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the sides of my chair like it would help me breathe. But I couldn't feel my breath. I couldn't feel anything. Carmen was still on the other end of the line. "Mama Soledad," she said softly, using the nickname she'd given me years ago. "Are you still there?" "I'm here," I whispered. "Barely." "I need you to stay calm. The documents were forged. I can see it already. She's rushing this, moving too fast. Sloppy digital footprints. That's her mistake." I swallowed hard. "But the land. It's gone." "On paper," she said. "But we're going to get it back." Matteo had overheard the call. He came running out from the guest room, his face pale with panic. "What's going on?" I looked at him with tired eyes. "Your sister has stolen everything. The land. The homes. My name." He blinked. "But how? You said the trust was sealed. Protected." "She found a way," I said bitterly. "She always finds a way." And now she had more than just my silence to exploit. She had all the legal rights, at least on the surface. No one in town knew about the forged documents. All they would see is an old woman screaming about betrayal and a polished, successful daughter holding shiny papers. "She's trying to finish me," I muttered. "Once and for all." Carmen sent over encrypted files within the hour. She had begun a trace. There was already proof the trust's access point had been manipulated from a device located in Lucia's corporate office in Barcelona. But proof wasn't enough. We needed action. So I made a call I never thought I would. To someone I had cut off 20 years ago. His name was Tadeo Vasquez. He was my late husband Rafael's cousin. Ex-lawyer. Got disbarred for whistleblowing on a major case that implicated half the judges in Valencia. Since then, he lived like a ghost, off the grid, bitter, brilliant, and dangerous when wronged. He picked up after one ring. "I wondered when you'd reach out, Soledad," he said with a voice like gravel and smoke. "You knew I would?" I asked. "I saw the headlines yesterday. Your daughter had a press release drafted about her growing estate portfolio in Alicante. Even used your name like it was her legacy." I held back tears. "Tadeo, she's stolen my life." "I know," he said, "and we're going to take it back." He arrived in Murcia by train that evening, dressed in a wrinkled brown blazer and holding an old leather briefcase that hadn't seen a courtroom in decades. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. Tadeo sat down in my kitchen and spread out files Carmen had emailed ahead. After 2 hours, he looked up at me and said, "She's good. I'll give her that." The forgery on the trust was elegant, almost surgical. But she missed one critical thing. "What?" "You're not incompetent." And that clause she invoked, The one that says the assets default to her if you're unfit to manage your own affairs. It's void. Void. Matteo leaned forward. Tadeo nodded. She needed a medical certificate, a legal declaration from a state doctor, something official proving you had dementia, psychosis, anything. She doesn't have that. I promise you.
So what now?
I asked.
Do we sue her?
Not yet, he said. If we do, she'll cover her tracks faster than we can blink. But if we draw her out, make her think she's won, let her get cocky, we'll catch her red-handed, I finished. He smiled.
Now you're thinking like her.
And so we began. The three of us, me, Matteo, and Tadeo, became a quiet little storm. We planted stories in the local press that I had stepped back from my affairs to enjoy retirement. We sent out word that I was moving to a smaller village, possibly a care home. I even faked a sighting at a church group bingo night in Malaga. Lucia took the bait. By the end of the week, she had listed 2 of my properties online for foreign investors. She was clearing house, selling everything, fast. What she didn't know was that every signature she used, every file she submitted, was being tracked and recorded by Carmen's team. We even had video from a courier who delivered one of the contracts. Lucia had signed it using a digital stamp she claimed I gave her. It was a fake. Carmen had already proven it. We were almost ready to expose her. Almost. Until something happened that shook me to my core. That Sunday morning, Matteo ran in with his phone in his hand. He was breathless, eyes wide. Lucia just posted a photo, he said.
Of what?
He turned the screen around. It was the kitchen. My kitchen. She had broken into the Murcia farmhouse and was standing there, holding up a bottle of wine. The caption read, "Cheers to letting go of the past. New beginnings in the countryside." Smiling face with smiling eyes, #fresh start, #familyland. My hand clutched my heart. She's inside the house, I whispered. She thinks it's hers now, Matteo said. She's trying to erase me, to take even the soil I touched, I said, my voice cracking. Tadeo stepped forward. Then we give her what she wants. I looked at him. What do you mean?
We let her throw a party.
2 days later, an invitation went out across Alicante and Murcia high society. You're invited to Lucia Belver's victory celebration. New land, new era, new legacy. But what Lucia didn't know was that every guest would be walking into a trap. A legal trap. A public trap. And a reckoning that would unfold live on camera. I wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. I was about to make history. The invitation was gold-trimmed and soaked in arrogance. Lucia had titled her event, Victory Celebration, the rebirth of the Belver legacy. Underneath that in smaller, crueler print, it read, in honor of my family's humble beginnings and where I've brought us today. Where does she bring us? I stared at the card and felt my stomach twist. The event was to be held at the very same farmhouse in Murcia that she had stolen, my farmhouse, the one I poured every euro, tear, and prayer into. She was calling it hers, hosting a public party there, toasting her theft like it was destiny. But what she didn't know was that every inch of the party had been wired. Carmen and her team arrived early the morning of the event. With her press badge and a friendly smile, she convinced Lucia's rented event staff that she was part of a documentary team doing a story on women in Spanish real estate. No one questioned her. Everyone wanted to be on camera. Every wine bottle label, every guest list name, every fraudulent sale document taped to the sideboard for decoration. We recorded it all. Meanwhile, I sat just across the property line, technically outside of what Lucia thought was hers, inside my friend's cottage with Tadeo and Matteo, watching the live stream. Do you think she'll give a speech? Mateo asked. Tadeo chuckled. Lucia? She won't be able to resist. By 5 p.m., the party was in full swing. Glasses clinked. People laughed. A local violinist played softly beneath strings of fairy lights. And then came the moment we were all waiting for. Lucia stepped onto the small patio stage in a crimson dress that clung to her like entitlement. She raised her glass. I want to thank everyone for being here, she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. This land has been in my family for decades, and now, finally, it's fulfilling its potential. I clenched my fists. She continued, my mother, bless her heart, wanted simple things. But I've always dreamed bigger. I'm proud to say this estate now includes a future wellness retreat, a vineyard in the works, and 3 new luxury cottages for tourism. There were cheers. But none of this, she said, holding up a gold-plated plaque, would be possible without my careful management of the Belver Trust. Carmen zoomed in on the plaque. It read, Lucia Belver, founder and visionary. EST on the foundation of family strength. Tadeo turned to me. She just admitted on video to controlling the trust. And she doesn't know, Carmen said in our earpiece, that the clause requires she not make public claims of ownership until the mental competency ruling is finalized. Which it never was. She just violated it, live. We had her. But it wasn't enough to catch her in private. I needed her to feel it, to know what it's like to be erased. So I stood. Mateo tried to stop me. Mama, no. But I stepped out into the open, past the garden gate, onto the property I once planted with wild roses. Gasps rippled through the crowd as I walked slowly toward the stage. Lucia spotted me, froze mid-sentence. The mic picked up the sound of her breath catching. I reached the front of the stage and looked up at her. I built this land, I said loudly. With my hands, my bones, my breath. The microphone was still live. Lucia's face turned red. This is a private event, she said through gritted teeth. I was never invited to the party you threw with my life, I said, my voice steady. So I invited myself. She stepped down, heels clicking fast. Get out. This is my property now. The paperwork is done. No, Lucia. The paperwork is forged. I turned toward the guests, the investors, and the press. This woman you see before you? She stole my trust. Falsified documents. Manipulated legal clauses meant to protect elderly citizens. She used a clause that only activates when I am mentally unfit. Gasps. But I am not unfit, I said. I'm furious. Carmen signaled her assistant. In seconds, a large screen flickered to life on the edge of the property wall. Audio began to play, Lucia's own voice, clipped from that USB file. The old woman will never know. The moment she shows signs of dementia, I'll activate the clause. The trust becomes mine. All of it. The crowd went still. Lucia's face was drained of color. No, that's fake. That's fake audio, she said, trembling. But Carmen stepped forward now, press badge visible. No, Lucia. It's real. And we have the documents, the witness testimony, and the digital logs to prove it. Someone from the back of the crowd shouted, Is she going to jail? Lucia turned to me, her voice cracking. Mama, please, don't do this. I walked closer. I begged you to love me. I begged you to come see me, to sit with me, to remember who I was. But all you saw was what you could take. She broke down, sobbing. I didn't know how to stop. I thought, if I took it all, maybe I'd finally be enough. I touched her cheek gently. You were always enough. You just didn't believe it. Then I stepped back and turned toward the cameras. This is not just about one woman stealing from her mother. This is about a system that lets power drown love. About a culture that forgets its elders until there's money involved. But I remember. I remember who I am. I raised my head. My name is Soledad Belver. I am 85 years old. I am not invisible. I am not senile. I am still here.
And I will not be erased.
As I walked away from the mic, the guests silent, the lights buzzing overhead. A police car pulled into the driveway. Lucia looked at me, wide-eyed. "Did you call them?" she whispered. I didn't answer. The officer stepped out and said, "Lucia Belver, you're under investigation for elder abuse, document fraud, and estate mismanagement. Please come with us."
Lucia let out a scream that echoed across the vines.
And for the first time in years, I smiled. The handcuffs clicked around Lucia's wrists like punctuation at the end of a long, cruel sentence. She wasn't crying anymore. She wasn't screaming either. Just quiet. Frozen. Like all her plans had shattered in the moment that flashing blue lights met cold reality. The officer gently turned her around and guided her toward the back of the car. Guests whispered, stepping aside like the sea parting for shame. Journalists raised their cameras slowly, unsure if it was too cruel or too justified. But I didn't look away. I watched my daughter, the one I once nursed through fevered nights, who I fed with stale bread and honey water, get into that car without a single glance back. Tadeo stood beside me, arms crossed. That's the look of someone realizing they've built their castle out of sand. Mateo was quiet. He hadn't said a word since Lucia was arrested. "Are you all right?" I asked. He nodded. I keep remembering when we were little. She used to braid my hair and sneak me cookies when you were working late.
I don't know when she changed.
I sighed. She didn't change overnight. She was chipped away slowly. By ambition. By pride. By fear of not being loved enough. He turned to me, guilt in his eyes. I should have stood up to her. "You're standing now," I said. "And that's what matters." 3 days later, we stood before a judge in Valencia. A private court session. No cameras. Just truth. Lucia's lawyer, a thin, nervous man, tried to delay the proceedings, citing emotional distress, but the judge waved him off.
"Ms. Belver," the judge said, turning to me.
"We've reviewed the evidence submitted by your counsel. The forged signatures, the recorded calls, the false medical claims, all point to a systematic attempt to defraud you." He paused. "Do you wish to press full charges?" Lucia looked up at me, eyes swollen from tears, wrists still red from the cuffs she wore just days earlier. It would have been so easy to say yes, to destroy her the way she tried to destroy me. But I took a breath.
Looked her in the eye.
"I want 2 things, Your Honor," I said. 1. Full return of all assets, trusts, properties, and accounts, immediately and permanently. Lucia looked down. She knew there was no way around that. "And 2, I continued, I want her to volunteer at a senior center in Zaragoza. Every weekend. For 1 full year. With supervision." There was a gasp in the room. Even the judge raised an eyebrow.
"May I ask why?" he said gently.
"Because shame doesn't teach. But service might," I replied. After the ruling, Lucia was led out of the courtroom, not in chains, but not in triumph either. She passed me slowly. Didn't say a word. But just before the doors closed behind her, I heard her voice.
"I'm sorry, Mama."
It was so soft, I almost thought I imagined it. The next morning, I walked the length of my garden barefoot. The sun was rising, soft light spilling over the hills of Murcia. My farmhouse was mine again. The papers had been corrected, the trust restored. And on the kitchen counter, the local paper ran a front-page story. Justice for Soledad Belver, grandmother reclaims stolen life. Inside was a quote from Carmen's article. She didn't shout. She didn't fight with fists. She simply told the truth. And truth was louder. Later that week, Carmen visited again. She hugged me tightly.
You did it.
We all did, I said.
But I'm not done yet.
Her eyebrows lifted.
No.
I walked her to the front gate and pointed to the hill just past the vineyard. That's where I'll build the Belver Center, I said. A place for women like me. Women who've been forgotten, used, or silenced. She smiled, eyes wet. You're incredible. I shook my head. I'm just old. And when you're old, you finally realize what really matters. A week later, I received a letter. It was handwritten. No return address. But the handwriting was familiar. Mama, I will never forgive myself. Not because of the trial.
Not because of the money.
But because I forgot who you were. I thought power was something to hold over people. You showed me it's something to share. I don't expect a reply, but I will serve every weekend like you asked. And maybe one day I'll become someone worth remembering again. Lucia. I folded the letter gently and placed it into a box marked, "Not gone, just healing." Then I picked up the foundation's blueprint, ready to meet the architect. But as I stepped outside, Carmen called again. Her voice was tense. Soledad, there's something you need to see. What is it? There's been a quiet transfer. A property under the Belver Trust was moved to someone else's name. Not Lucia. Someone named Emilio Cortez. I stopped cold. I thought it was over. But I was wrong. I stood in the middle of my vineyard, the breeze gently lifting my white shawl as Carmen's words echoed in my mind. A property under the Belver Trust, transferred to Emilio Cortez. That name again. Emilio. The man behind the curtain. The cousin Raphael once banished from our lives. The shadow behind Lucia's schemes. I thought the storm had passed, but now I saw it. Lucia had never worked alone. And part of the rot was still in the roots. Which property? I asked Carmen, my voice low and sharp. The cottage in Javia, she said. The most valuable of the set. Oceanfront. Clean title. Gone. That house wasn't just real estate. That was where Raphael proposed to me. Where we took our first and last vacation as a complete family. Where I buried the only love letter he ever wrote me. In the garden, under the lemon tree. And now Emilio had it. My hands trembled. Not with fear, but fury. How did he get into the trust? I asked. Carmen's voice dropped. He had access from the beginning. Years ago. Before you added encryption. Lucia gave him old passwords. He's been watching. Waiting. The moment we pulled attention away from the rest of the assets, he moved in. So we were celebrating too early, I whispered. Yes, she said. But it's not too late. Tadeo and Matteo met me in the study that night. Tadeo, as always, was calm and surgical. We still have legal grounds. We can file an emergency injunction. But it'll be slow. Months. We don't have months, I said, standing up. We have days. Emilio is a snake. Once he secures the property under a shell company, we'll never see it again. Matteo looked between us. So what do we do? I turned to him. Slowly. We take it back. Ourselves. The plan was reckless. The kind of thing no lawyer would advise. But when you're 85 and you've had your life stolen piece by piece, Sometimes caution feels like a luxury you can't afford. So at sunrise, we drove to Javia. I wore Raphael's old jacket. I don't know why, maybe I needed to feel him with me, like some final piece of the old me was marching forward for justice. We reached the cottage gate just as Emilio's team was arriving, surveyors, realtors, and two muscle-bound men who looked more like bodyguards than property managers. Matteo parked the car and stared. This looks serious. They always do when they're afraid someone will expose them, Taddeo said, already opening his briefcase. I stepped out of the car, walked past the guards, straight up to Emilio Cortez. He hadn't changed much, still dressed in clothes that looked expensive but didn't fit quite right. Still smelled of cigar smoke and cheap wine. He smirked when he saw me. "Soledad," he said, pretending warmth.
"What a surprise."
"Don't," I said.
"You knew this day would come."
He shrugged. "You should be resting, not chasing ghosts."
"I'm chasing what's mine," I snapped.
"This property is under legal dispute."
"Not anymore," he said smugly, holding up a document.
"Signed and filed. I have full rights of entry and development." I stepped closer. "You don't own the memory buried in that garden. You don't own the nights I spent here, rocking my babies to sleep."
"You don't own me, Emilio."
He smiled. "Maybe not.
"But I own the land."
"Then you'd better tell that to the judge," Taddeo said, stepping forward and serving him the emergency injunction papers. "Filed last night. Effective immediately. Any development or sale will be considered contempt of court." Emilio's smirk faltered. Taddeo wasn't done. "Also, your company has been subpoenaed for tax fraud. Carmen's press release goes out in 1 hour unless you relinquish the title voluntarily." Matteo stepped forward too. "You should walk away. While you still can." Emilio's eyes darted between us. Between the cameras Carmen had secretly planted in the hedges. Between the press cars started to roll up the road. And just like that, the storm broke. He threw the paper on the ground and walked off, shouting into his phone. He was done. That night, I returned to the lemon tree in the garden. I dug quietly with my hands, tears spilling freely. And there, wrapped in waxed cloth, was the letter Raphael wrote me the night before he died. It read, "Soledad, if you're reading this, it means the house is still yours. And you're still stronger than they know. I built with bricks, but you built with blood and soul. Whatever they take, remember this, your roots are deeper." I cried for him, for the woman I used to be, for the mother they tried to erase, for the legacy I finally reclaimed. 2 weeks later, Carmen published the full story. It went viral across Spain. The woman who took her legacy back. People messaged from across the country. Women, widows, mothers, granddaughters, telling me they saw themselves in my story, that they were afraid too. But now, they weren't alone. We opened the Belver Center the following spring. The sign outside reads, "Here, we remember the women the world forgets." Lucia? She kept her promise. 1 year of volunteering. She rarely speaks to me, but she smiles now. Softly, sadly, maybe healing in her own way. Matteo lives nearby now. He helps me run the foundation. We cook dinner together every Sunday. Taddeo still wears that wrinkled blazer. Says it reminds him that not all cases need a courtroom. And me. I walk barefoot through my garden every morning. I water the lemon tree. I read Raphael's letter when it rains. On my 87th birthday, we held a celebration at the first Belver Center. The women baked cakes. The staff painted signs. Matteo brought out his old guitar. And as the sun dipped low across the hills, I looked out at the people I loved, not because we shared blood, but because we shared healing. And then Lucia walked in. No fanfare. No announcement. Just her, with her granddaughter. My daughter asked to meet her great-grandmother, she said quietly. I looked into the little girl's eyes, green like Raphael's. What's her name? I asked, my voice trembling. Lucia smiled. Soledad. I no longer measure my life in years, pain, or what was taken. I measure it in what I restored. My name is Soledad Belver, and they tried to write me out of my own story. But I took the pen back. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of a mother, a grandmother, or someone you once knew who gave everything and asked for nothing, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let their stories be heard. Let your story be remembered. Because no one is ever too old to rise again. Thank you for watching. Your voice matters too.